morning, everyone. I'm Amy Hoey. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Lowell General Hospital and Circle Health, and I'm thrilled to be here today with the Enterprise Bank team. We're here today to talk about a journey from stress to strength and how we can leverage our experience, identity, and values to build resilience and truly gain hope. And this is a wonderful conversation at an incredibly unusual time in our lives and our history related to stress. I had the honor of serving as the hospital's incident commander for our pandemic response. And these are some images of our amazing team. And they're all special to me, but I'll call your attention to the gentleman on the right-hand side of your screen. He was 102 years old when he came for his first COVID vaccine, and he literally came back on his 103rd birthday for his second dose. So that was a real feel-good moment for us. We, along with the rest of the world, have had a long journey navigating the pandemic. From a time when things were really scary and very unknown, we were able to build confidence that we could care for COVID patients and keep each other safe. To date at the hospital, we've discharged over 2,000 inpatients treated for COVID-19 and sadly supported over 400 patients who have died of COVID-19 at our hospital. We've all experienced so many things we've never done before. And on the next slide, you can see at the hospital photos of our team, and on the far right with those blue numbers, that was the field hospital that we set up twice in response to the pandemic. And then last spring, our mass vac site serving over 160,000 people at a time when there was great hope and optimism that we were emerging on the other side of the pandemic. And now we know we weren't quite there yet. And now we've transitioned to a period of extreme staffing challenges across all roles. And I know that you are experiencing this as well in your organizations. I'd like to call your attention to the photo at the top middle of your screen with Reverend Dean Shapley and his team. And you'll be hearing from Dean today. And on the next slide, you'll see the spirit of what really carried us through, and that's teamwork, supporting each other every minute of every day and taking turns, truly carrying a heavy load. Through it all, we focused on resilience and caring for the caregiver, and more recently, talking a lot about decompression, and Reverend Dean's going to share many thoughts on that today. One of our secret weapons in our battle against COVID-19 was Reverend Dean and his team. Reverend Dean Shapley is the Director of Mission and Chaplaincy at Lowell General Hospital and Circle Health. He's a United Methodist clergy and served several churches near Chicago, and has worked as a chaplain and a spiritual care director for various hospital systems. And we are so blessed that he is with our hospital system now. Reverend Dean has specialized training in critical incident stress response and leads the hospital's critical incident peer support team and is the chair of the hospital's medical ethics committee. During the pandemic, Reverend Dean gave seminars on cumulative stress to the leaders of the healthcare facilities in northeastern Massachusetts and served on the Commonwealth Ethics Advisory Board for developing the Massachusetts Crisis Standards of Care. And I could not love and appreciate more Reverend Dean, who we're going to hear from now. Dean?
Thank you, Amy, and the feeling is mutual. I do feel very honored to be part of this great organization here who has really shown its true colors through this pandemic in how we were all able to step up and really respond to the needs of our patients in a very strange, very difficult time. So thank you again, Amy, and let's jump right into the topic of the day. This is an interesting time, and we all have felt the stress of the past year and a half or more in various ways, and now we're trying to figure out what do we do with that and how do we move forward in our work, forward at home, and be healthy in doing that. My premise today is that each of us already has really most of the resources that we need, the internal resources we need to turn the stress that we're feeling into our very strength. And if we're feeling like a victim, like this has happened to us, and we've been powerless in that process, we really do also have the resources to turn that around and to feel victorious in our work and at home. Um, I'm hoping that that some of the questions that you come with today or issues that you have will be addressed. And at this point, I'm asking if you have specific questions or comments that you're things that you're hoping to see addressed, that you would put them in the chat. And Andrew will be monitoring that and will let me know um, when there are questions or issues that we can tackle. But the first thing I want to do is to give a picture of what the current situation really is um, in terms of stress levels, uh, and that's locally, that's nationwide, that's even worldwide. And we do have some things to look at. We have some indicators of how things have changed over the past year and a half or so. Some of those indicators include what's happened to our stress levels, the mental health admissions to hospital, the suicide rates, which it's interesting, the suicide rates actually dropped at the beginning of the pandemic and then started rising through the pandemic, especially with our young people. Suicide rates now among our own teenagers has risen quite rapid. We'll look at divorce numbers, employment, termination issues, folks that are seeking mental health professionals, that has changed. Prescriptions for anti-anxiety and anti-depression prescriptions, and then the feelings of isolation and disconnected. All of these things have changed. We're going to look at just a few of these. In terms of stress levels, this is I think, quite a dramatic change. This is comparing the beginning of 2019 to the beginning of 2021. And you can see that about 12% of adults reported feeling symptoms of anxiety or depression. Compared to 2 years later, that has risen to 41%. That's 3.5 or 4 times as many adults as 2 years before. Another way to look at that is that 2 out of every 5 adults are reporting symptoms of anxiety or depression. Quite a dramatic change. In terms of divorce, I feel like I wasn't able to find great statistics, but it is clear from what I did read and have found out is that the divorce rates around the world have gone up. In other words, people are having a hard time in their relationships due to the pandemic. And it's interesting to me that it's new. A lot of the people looking for ways to get out of a relationship are newlyweds. They've only been in a relationship a little bit, and it's like the feeling that, well, this isn't what I signed up for. I didn't know it was going to be like this. I mean, honestly, the new relationships are already kind of interesting. There's a lot going on at the beginning of a relationship, and you put this much stress on it, and something's going to give. But it is clear that the pandemic has been devastating on relationships. In terms of employee burnout, this has also risen up. It said that it says that 52% of all workers are feeling burned out, and this is not exclusive to any particular age range or how long people have been working. It's hitting everybody at every level. People are saying that they're burnt out. And we'll get into a little bit later what burnout actually means. And what I want to offer you is that there are some resources online. If you're feeling burned out, or if some of your folks are feeling burned out, there's some good kind of self-tests online that you can go to, and that as a check-in with yourself to see, well, I'm feeling this way, but how am I doing really? And we're going to be able to send these slides out to you later, and included with that slide pack, I'll include a couple of links um, for these resources in terms of burnout self-test, and there's a couple others that I'll include when I send out the slide deck. But this is affecting companies across our nation, I'm sure across the world as well. Everybody's feeling like this has been too much. We have folks in our own organization here at Lowell General that have decided, well, I've been doing this long enough, or the pandemic was too much. And not only are they taking a break, but some people are saying, I don't even want to work in healthcare anymore. Which makes it then doubly difficult for the organizations who are experiencing this loss of employees. How do we fill those gaps and bring people in so the work can continue? In terms of prescription, in terms of anxiety, from just in the very beginning of 2020, anti-anxiety prescriptions went up 34%. And then with similar thing with the antidepressant medication, in a single year, it went up 20%. That means people are really looking for ways to manage feelings of anxiety and depression that have come about during the pandemic. And then finally, I wanted to take a look at these feelings of isolation and disconnectedness. And I thought this was a good piece from an article. It calls it the double pandemic. It's not the first part of the pandemic is the disease itself, but the other pandemic is what isolation is doing to us. Struggle to balance literal survival with all the things that make surviving worthwhile has never been so clear. In other words, we've been taking these steps for people to stay at home, for social distancing, quarantining, and it has created quite a problem. Loneliness has increased significantly. Emotional distress has tripled. And I thought this last part was very interesting. Evidence links social isolation to increased risk of death from all causes and increased morbidity across a variety of physical health outcomes. In other words, it isn't just how we feel. How we feel affects our actual physical health. And that this is what happens when the isolation continues over time. In other words, if our isolation had lasted only a week or a month or even 2 months, we would have been able to manage this. But it's because it's been going on for so long that it just is breaking people down. This has lasted for over a year and a half for some people being isolated. And that isolation has started to affect us in many, many ways. I remember when I was studying psychology, and you might have seen this if you ever took kind of a beginning developmental psychology class. There was an experiment I think done back in the 50s where they had these baby monkeys that they isolated. They gave them everything they needed to survive. They gave them food, they gave them shelter, they gave them a clean place, but they didn't give them any other monkeys to interact with. They didn't give them a mother. There was no friends. There was no anything. They were absolutely alone. They gave them, if I remember correctly, a piece of wood wrapped in carpet. And these baby monkeys would cling to that. But over time, it wasn't enough. These baby monkeys failed and even died. because this is called failure to thrive, and it happens when we don't have other people with us. Um, we need people to survive, and this effect is largest upon young people and adolescents. As adults, we can figure out how to manage this sometimes, but young people cannot. We are social animals. Without others, we fail to thrive, and sometimes we even fail to survive. I know I'm painting a pretty grim picture here, and I'm sorry about that. One last thing I wanted to look at, as far as the numbers of people actually seeking therapy from professionals. Um, 1 in 5 uh, adults have sought therapy related to pandemic anxiety or stress. And we're looking at therapy now in a variety of different ways. People are turning to mental health apps on their phones. Lots and lots of folks are now having therapy by way of telehealth um, uh, means, being able to see the therapist over the phone. Um, but of those who are seeking therapy, over half, 62% of people who have sought therapy have sought it in the past year. That's a huge amount of people that have turned to therapy for help. Now, I actually see some hope in this. On the one, this is a great time to be a mental health professional, by the way. You've got people lining up at your door. But I also see hope in this, in that it means that paying attention to our mental health and our wellness and our well-being is actually becoming very normal, and it's less stigmatized. It's absolutely normal for people to say, I was with my therapist this week and it was great, and really helped me through this or through that. These conversations are becoming much more normal as people are. These are some of the indicators of what's been happening in the past year and a half. Probably not a surprise, but I wanted to give kind of a comprehensive picture of what's been going on. So I want to get into the whole issue of stress and what stress is, where it comes from, why we get stressed, and then what we can do about it. And here's just a quick list of reasons that we experience stress. We come to our day with a certain set of expectations, and then what we're faced with is reality. When there is a difference between our expectations and reality, we experience stress. We expect a routine, and what we're faced with is frequent change, and that creates stress. This was very clear for us here at the hospital during the height of the pandemic. It seemed like we were changing every day how we were managing what was going on, whether it was a shortage in supplies or changes in how we were to use personal protective equipment. Every day it seemed we were pivoting to something that change alone creates stress. We come to the day feeling like we have a certain level of safety, but when we perceive that there is a threat to that safety, our stress rises. Similarly, it's about what we know versus the unknown, feeling like there's something coming or something out there that we don't know what's going to happen. Our stress level rises. Another thing that happens is that, as things progress, as things move forward, as things heighten, a lot of us don't really know how to say no to asks. And it's because we want to be helpful. We want to have answers. We want to be able to fix things. We don't want to say no to our supervisors. And so what happens is that things keep piling on, responsibilities pile up. And when that happens, our stress levels rise. Another thing that happens is that when things change so much and so rapidly, uh, we feel a sense of loss. We feel a sense of loss of how things used to be. We pine for what we used to think of as normal. And we may not think about it very much, but that is a loss to us. And whenever there is a loss, there is a sense of grief. So we're managing stress and grief at the same time. Whenever we are threatened by something, whenever things are changes, we have this very visceral lizard brain type reaction that we've called fight or flight, and there's also a third one which is freeze. That when we feel threatened, we either want to fight against it, or we want to run away from it, or perhaps we freeze like a deer in headlights. We don't know what to do. This is a survival response. It helps us in extreme circumstances. But when that survival response is triggered again and again and again, and our body's hormones rise to that occasion, our body starts to react against with too much cortisol in our system, with too much survival response, we start to get numb um, and then become unable to respond anymore. This is what happens when there is an accumulation of stress response. When we react again and again and again to new changes and new stress, we begin to get numb. And that is what leads to dysfunction and to burnout. So we do recognize that there are different levels of stress, and uh, your everyday functioning is what we would call normal stress. Every day we're faced with stress. We're really never at a place where there's no stress. There's always pressure. There's always something going on that we need to respond to, and that's normal. And in fact, that's healthy. But then there's a level above that where there's more things coming at us. We're not quite sure how to respond, but we're doing the best we can. But it's starting to affect us. That's stress. The level above that we call dysfunction. We're trying to manage, but we're not managing well. That's at a dysfunction level. And then if it goes far beyond that, it becomes burnout. And on the next slide here, here's a way to look at, what is your level of stress at this point. Again, there's a lot of information here. This will be in the slide deck, so you can take a look at it a little more carefully. But that normal stress level, it's optimal. You're working at your best. You're prepared. You're motivated. You're focused. You might even be having some fun in your life. Your ethics are important. You're behaving ethically. Everything's going great. That's normal stress. At distress, you're feeling a little bit distressed. If there's something that uh, faces you with some risk, you can resolve it usually. You might find yourself getting a little irritable or angry at times. You may find yourself losing a little focus or losing some motivation. You might be having some symptoms such as sleep symptoms. Feel like you might not be having fun very often. The level above that, which we call injured or dysfunctional, is more severe. That the stress happening to you might leave scars. This is a higher risk. You may feel panicky. You may feel not just angry sometimes, but rageful. Might feel intensely anxious or depressed. You no longer feel like you're yourself, like you're not normal. It might even lead to substance misuse and misconduct at work. And at this point, you need to be looking seriously at what resources you have, talking to people, supervisors or others in your organization that can be helpful to try to find a way to pivot back to some sort of hormone to get. The level beyond that, of course, is the burnout level. This you may have a clinical diagnosis at this point, something really going wrong. Your stress injuries are unhealed and just being added to. You may feel impaired at all times, severe distress, severe anxiety or depression. You're impaired in terms of how you deal with other people. And this is a time to seek professional help. Now, we put this poster up a couple weeks ago on National Mental Health Day. We had this poster up near our cafeteria, and we had one nursing supervisor who came over to this poster and was reading it, and she said, I think I'm in the dark maroon area. There should be another color even darker than burnout. That was sad for me to hear, and I think she was half joking, but there was also an awareness that things can get pretty dark when we get to that burnout level. And here's some symptoms of stress that people might be feeling, and these are symptoms for us to look out for in others as well. Stress affects us physically, emotionally, affects our relations, and it affects us spiritually as well. Stress affects really the wholeness of our being. And these are things not only to look out, like I said, not to look out only in ourselves, but to look out in others as well. As leaders, we need to pay attention to our coworkers and to those who we are responsible for. We need to pay attention and look for changes in behavior, changes in mood. Are people coming in later? Are people wanting to leave earlier? Are they taking more time off? Are they angry or just down at work? Are they not getting their work done the way they used to? You remember what we always hear at the airport, if you see something, say something. Well, one of those times, if we see something with our peers, with our coworkers, or with those we're responsible for, it's time for us to say something about it. Not in terms of being disciplinary, but in terms of how can we offer support, how can we offer options, and be able to recognize these things before the symptoms turn into burnout. Because burnout leads to termination, leads to resignation, and we don't want to get there. We want to nip that in the bud. And let this then be a conversation. Let us be creative with our options when it comes to. We'll talk about some of the options. And it's a time for us to work with our coworkers to make a plan going forward to how we can address some of the issues. Here are some other symptoms to look out for, in maybe largely in ourselves. Overgeneralization is a cognitive distortion. Making broad statements based on one situation. Personalization, blaming ourselves for everything. These are all very natural things that we do, but in times of stress, we do them even more intensely. Filtering, focusing on the negative, ignoring the positive. All or nothing thinking, or what we also might call black and white thinking. Only seeing the extreme. Catastrophizing, blowing things out of proportion, jumping to conclusions. Emotional reasoning. I love that one. That's like, however I feel must be a fact. It must be true. That's how I feel. Again, discounting the positive and focusing on should statements. Should be this, should be that way. As we're using should statements, what we're doing is we're pairing what is the way we would like it to be, instead of focusing on and dealing with what is actually happening. So these are some of the things, these are some of the ways that stress affects us, what stress looks like in ourselves and others. So what can we do about it? We're going to talk about some things and ways to reduce our levels of stress. But before I get to those, we're going to talk about some unhealthy ways to reduce our stress. And you may know some of these already and understand what this is about. When people get stressed, sometimes they turn to alcohol, to drugs, to gambling, to over or under eating or unhealthy eating. They turn towards dangerous activities. We tend to take things out on ourselves or try to take our anger out on someone else. All of these lead to a downward spiral. This is why these are unhealthy. They might make us feel better right in the moment, but it only lasts a moment and then we feel worse. So then we try to find another way to feel better. And these can lead to a downward spiral that takes us to a very unhealthy place. These are unhealthy ways that we try to reduce our stress. There are healthier ways. And I'm going to divide them into short-term strategies and long-term strategies. Notice that I'm using the word reduction, not stress alleviation. As I said before, we're never really without stress. That is an unrealistic goal. But we can reduce our levels of stress. And I operate largely on what we think of as the oxygen mask principle. You've heard this again, using the airplane as a model here, as they tell you when the oxygen mask drops from the ceiling, first put it on yourself and then help the person next to you. In other words, if we can't help our own levels of stress, we're not going to be able to help anybody else. So we need to look at ourselves first and see how we're doing and try some things out to help our own stress levels. And then we can help others. The solutions for reducing stress are largely going to be tailored to what works for you. And you know some of these things already. It just becomes a question of being clear about them and engaging those processes. When we've talked to people after a critical incident here at the hospital, one of the things that we do in a small group is go on and talk, okay, what are you going to do to help relieve the stress that you're feeling? And the suggestions that come up from the people in the group are always very helpful. Somebody's going to go for a run. Somebody's going to go walk their dog. Someone's going to go home and hug their kids. Someone's going to go to choir rehearsal and sing their lungs out. There are so many ways that people have to reduce their stress, and you probably already know some of those best ways. But again, it's a question of how do you engage them. There are certain exercises that you can engage in that increase your focus, and increasing our focus, and which means letting all the extraneous stuff go, is a great way to kind of get back on track and let some of the stress go. There are many ways to get into meditation, that if you begin your day with 15 minutes of meditation, the rest of your day is going to be completely different than if you hadn't done it. There are meditation apps that you can download on your phone. It can take 1 minute, 2 minutes to focus on your breathing, change how you're thinking, and reduce those feelings of stress. You can go to, on YouTube, there's thousands of both short and long guided meditations that help you manage your breathing and your thinking. And I'm going to include a link as well when I send out the deck slides. Some people find a lot of relief through massage therapy, through short, intense exercise, even in the middle of your day at work. Go for a quick walk and moving your muscles, getting your blood going, actually reduces your stress significantly. And then I'm going to teach you a quick technique that that's been around for a couple of years, that called the Be Calm technique. That is, again, a quick way to reduce your own stress. And this is the technique, starting with the letters BCAL. The first thing that you do is simply breathe and focus on your breathing. The goal of focusing on your breathing is to slow it down and let it become measured. In other words, you breathe in and out on a count, a 4 count or a 6 count, but focus on the breath coming in and going out in a measured way. And while you're breathing, if you're focusing on that, you can let all other thoughts and other sensations just drift away. I want to say something about this technique and about other meditation techniques. Some people get worried that they're doing it wrong, if they're not doing it exactly according to a plan. That's our task-oriented brains working, and we even need to let that go. If you're doing it right, your mind wanders. That's kind of the whole point. It's for your mind to wander away from the stress. But here is a technique here that helps us to. So if we focus on our breathing for a minute and let everything else kind of fade, then we center down on what's actually happened right now. Let the list of the day go, the tasks go, and center on this very moment, how we're feeling, which leads to the A, assess. In focusing on our breathing and centering on the moment, how do I feel at this moment? What is actually happening right now? See this moment with clarity, with an unbiased perspective, the reality of this very moment. And in that understanding, that perspective of the moment, let go of expectation. Let go of the judgment, those should statements. Should be doing this, I should be doing that, it should be different. Let all that go. What's real is happening right at the moment. Let go of your assumptions, let go of the should, let go of all of it. Be in. Finally, the M stands for management. Now that you're aware of the current moment, your current feeling, you can manage them. You can say, I want to feel a little different than this. I want to feel hopeful. I want to feel positive about what's going on. How am I going to do that? Take a moment to really assess and to think forward about what you want to do and how you do it. You can do, if you get good at this, you can do this in 3 minutes. I know a guy who got this process down to a 1-minute meditation technique, and it can change your entire perspective. Yeah. So those are some short-term techniques and ways to manage stress. But we're also interested in longer-term solutions. And I'll touch on each of these things. In the movie The Lion King, there's this great scene when the spirit of the father, Mufasa, appears to his son Simba, who's run away to a foreign land. And he appears to remind Simba of his identity, his heritage, and his purpose. says, look inside yourself. You are more than what you have become. Remember who you are. This is the first step, actually, in building resilience and relieving some of the longer term stress. Remember who you are, why you do what you do, and what is at the core of your identity. And to affirm that this is who I am, and that I am more this moment. I am more than the pandemic. I am more than the feeling of stress that I'm feeling right now. I am so much more than what's happening. And I'm capable to manage it. The way to see the big picture of your own self. And doing that, there's an opportunity here to re-energize your purpose. Now, your purpose is much more than your role. Your purpose has to do with how you really identify your life's goals, answering the question, why am I here? What am I here to do? And what am I here to be? Those are big questions and can't necessarily be answered in a moment. It takes introspection, it takes time, it takes an understanding of yourself. And your purpose can change throughout your life, but it's not necessarily related to your job. It's not about necessarily your employment. In other words, your employment can change, but your purpose may not change, and vice versa. If you may work at the same place for a long period of time, but your purpose within that position may change. So they're not really related necessarily. Many people do associate their purpose with their job, and that they run into trouble because employment ends. And I think we all might be able to tell stories of people we know who have retired from their job and then feel completely lost because that was their entire identity. That's how they understood themselves to be active in the world. And they associated their job with purpose. And so without their job, they feel like they've lost purpose. So we need to go deeper than that when we're considering our purpose. So rediscovering or re-energizing our purpose can help us gain new perspectives on the work that we're doing and how we're living our life outside of work. A lot of this has to do with assessing what we're spending our time on. Because again, we have a hard time saying no. We say yes to too many things, and what that turns into is that we're spending a lot of time on things that really aren't fulfilling us or fulfilling our purpose or helping other people out. We're spending time on the wrong things, which means it reduces time to spend on something. That has to do with understanding our purpose. It's also an opportunity to confirm our principles and values. Understanding those can help us make important decisions about what we do at work, what we do at home, and affirming those principles and values. Moral distress arises when there's conflict between our principles and our values and the actual work that we do or the life that we're home. Let me give you an example of moral distress that has arisen sometimes right here at the hospital. Before the pandemic, nurses had particular ways that they enjoyed taking care of their patients, the time that they spent, the care that they spent. But the necessity of the pandemic meant that our patients were largely isolated in their rooms. Very few people could go in and visit the patient, and the nurses and doctors that did go in to visit the patients would do it less frequently than they used to. So nurses were feeling like, I'm not caring for this patient the way I think I should. And that causes some significant moral distress. I should be able to do better, but I can't. It gets right down to a conflict with their own principles and values. So they experience moral distress. I was talking to a guy a couple weeks ago who is a retired dentist, and what he enjoyed about being a dentist was talking to people and getting to know people and seeing them face to face and people telling stories back and forth. It was all about connection with people. And when his job became such that he had to wear full body PPE, that he was to talk as little as possible, that they couldn't see his face and they couldn't share stories that they used to. He made a decision that, well, I had been planning on retirement a couple years down the road, but I don't want to do this anymore. This is not the work that I signed up for. This is not why I wanted to be a dentist. So he retired. This was an example of moral distress. I can't do things the way I used to. Of course, the opposite of that is integrity. And integrity occurs when your principles and your values align with your purpose in your life. This is a great place to be if you're feeling like you're living with integrity. It's a dynamic state. It's not a static state because things do continue to change over time. But if you're not feeling like you're living with integrity, then there's something there to look at and ask questions about what you're doing, what your principles and values are, what you understand your purpose. So it's a time to take some reality checks, to take a close look at your life. This is a good time on kind of the backside of the worst of the pandemic to ask some big questions of ourselves. And we can do this in there's lots of different aspects to our reality and what we want to look at. It's time to look at our finances. How are we managing our finances, personal and otherwise? Are we doing with them what we feel is an expression of our values? It's time to take a look at our relationships and ask some deep questions about how things are going. It's definitely a time to look at our time management. Again, are we spending time on the things that are most important for others and for our own health? The time to listen to the doctor and pay attention to our physical health. Are we getting enough sleep? What does our diet look like? What does our exercise, our activity look like? Are we listening to what our doctor says? And of course, it's time to take a look at our mental health. How do we feel compared to how we felt 2 years ago? Are we feeling that, are we experiencing some level of stress or anxiety or depression that is significantly different than before? And if so, what can we do about it? It's time to look at our goals, yearly goals, our 5-year or 10-year goals, and say, where are we on track with this? Have they completely changed? And if so, how? And to put some time and thought into that. And maybe most importantly of all these things, this isn't just something we do in isolation. Again, isolation is probably part of the problem here. This is something that we can do with others and check in with others. Say, this is how I see my life or what's happening in my life, but what do you see? Am I rightly seeing it this way? Those conversations can lead us to a much more realistic point of view on our current situation. I want to talk for a couple minutes about resilience. Again, these are long-term things that we're talking. And I want to use the metaphor of the tree. This image here, I really enjoy because you can see very clearly that the root system underneath the ground is as big as the branching system of the tree above ground. That's important because because the ideal when it comes to having resilience is to have balance. The roots underground being about self-care, being about our resources, uh, being about where we can turn when things are tough. The branches above ground being what's happening right now, the expressions of our life, our work, relationships. So the metaphor of the tree works because when a tree has a root system like this, a large and healthy root system, when a storm comes along, the wind will not knock it down. It will survive the storm. If the tree has a shallow root system or only a couple of one or two roots, when the storm comes along, the tree will fall over. So the secret to fixing that is one of two things. If there's too much going on above ground, if the storm is hitting too hard, you either have to trim the branches or you have to grow the root. In other words, when it comes to trimming branches, it means to knock off some of the responsibility, that there's too much going on above ground. To grow the roots means to grow those resources that are out there, to have more connection, to have a variety of resources to turn to, and to make those relationships deep. So it might be a combination of both. If things are tough, if the storm is too strong, it might be that we have to do both: trim the branches of the things that are going on in our life, and to grow the roots of our resilience. So there's ways we can do this in our personal lives, which is what we've been talking about. But then there are also ways that we can do this at work. And here are some ways that we can look at our work environment and bring mental wellness and well-being into what we've called the new normal. In other words, these things are happening not just to a few of us, but to everybody, as the statistics show. With the rise of anxiety and depression and all these other markers that are rising, it's becoming normal for all of us to feel like something's not right. And therefore, it's something that we can work on together, even at work. It will take time. We're going to reconstruct the work DNA, how things happen at work and what work is really like. It takes time to change. It's a cultural shift. So it takes intention, it takes work, and it takes time. It's important for it to be a focus at work because, let's be honest, it's where we spend a lot of our time, a lot of our energy, a lot of our life. And if things are going smoothly at work, things can go smoothly all over the place. And it's a two-way street. If things are good at home, things can be better at work. And if things are good at work, things can be better at home. And so it's important that we focus on this because it is happening to so many people and because it affects all of us. Now, how we do that is important. If we're in a work situation where people are stressed out and we simply react and say, oh, let's try this, or oh, let's try that, or my friend tried this and it seemed to help. That kind of reactivity leads to band-aid solutions, which also lead to scattershot results. In other words, not reliable results. And ultimately, that can also lead to. So reacting just to what's going on is not always the best solution. A better solution is to be proactive about it, and to take careful time and careful study, careful thought to address what's going on. Proactivity, showing those around us that this is important, that we are working on solutions, It drives engagement, it drives buy-in, it drives momentum, and ultimately things will begin to change and be better. This only happens if it happens from the top down. Now, I don't always enjoy using hierarchical language, but let's be honest, that is how a lot of our work is structured. And so I just want to say that leaders have to lead. And what that means is that it has to come from the top. We have to be able to talk about it, which will normalize it. We have to risk being vulnerable ourselves and be able to say, I myself am in therapy, and it's one of the best decisions I ever made. And it works for me, and maybe it'll work for you as well. Things like that. In other words, be vulnerable, be honest and open about what's going on with yourself. We have to lead also in terms of giving recognition to those who are doing a great job and helping with the well-being of the organization. Wellness should be part of our onboarding process. That's one way to build it into our DNA, to talk about wellness when folks are coming on board. It should be part of our employee surveys, how people are feeling about their work. It can be part of our annual reviews with individual employees to talk about wellness and how we're taking care of ourselves. In other words, and I don't mean, in an annual review, you say, are you seeing a therapist? But to check in and say, how are you doing? Are things okay? How are you feeling about work? Are things different than they used to be? What can I do to help make things better? It also means, as leaders, to being attentive to the budget. In other words, we all know that a budget is a reflection of our values. And if we value wellness and well-being, that will be reflected somehow in our budget, that we will put not only time and effort, but we'll put our funds into answering some of these questions. And I also want to say here at the end also that leaders have to lead, but also employees have to. This is both a top-down and a bottom-up solution. That there needs to be room for employees to say, this is what's happening, this is what's going on, this is what I need, how can. And for leaders to ask themselves, what is my message to my employee? What do I say to them at the end of the day? Am I modeling hope? Am I helping them to let go of work when they go home? So I am aware of the time, and so I'm going to go through these final slides a little bit quicker. Some ways to do this are to have frequent and regular check-ins with each other. I am clear on this slide that this is about peers checking in with each other, not necessarily about supervisors checking in with their employees, but about peers getting together and checking in with each other. There are different ways to do that. You can say, okay, what's one word to describe how you're feeling today? Or what's one story you can share with us about something you're happy about at life? What is a story that has nothing to do with work that gives us a little insight on? And then there's the decompression check-in. What are you doing on a daily basis to leave work at work? You might have an opportunity, if you don't already, to have a wellness officer or a wellness committee to focus on these issues and to bring resources to the workforce. It's more than just a morale officer. There's much more involved in an active and effective wellness officer. Decompression is one of the most important things that we have found that we can help our employees with in terms of managing stress. Decompression is, can you go home from work? Can you leave work at work and be truly away and be at home? It's about balance, and we all want balance. There are ways to do that. I think we get used to checking our work email when we're at home. Why? Is that entirely necessary? Are we available 24/7 for people to call us from work? Why? Aren't there ways that we can manage that in a different way? Have we used our ability to delegate fully? Have we done actual absence planning? In other words, I'm going to be gone, and so this is the plan for when I'm gone. If there's an emergency, do this. If there's something that's slightly less urgent, do that. What are the connections that people make when I'm not around? Do you have a routine for letting go yourself, or when you go home from work? I know folks who, when they change out of their scrubs and into their street clothes, that for them is a ritual for taking off work. They're actually physically taking off their work and putting on their home life. There are lots of different routines people use, but it can be a very helpful way to let go of work. Exercise and activity help a lot to let things go. Paying attention to our human connections outside of work that have nothing to do with work. Being engaged in hobbies and creativity. Finding ways to have fun and maybe even have a date night with your significant other. Putting those things into a priority position are great ways to decompress. And date night doesn't have to be going out somewhere. Date night can happen at home. It just means making a special time to focus just on that. This is the final list here, and I'm aware of our time. But you have a lot of resources. Of course, your first go-tos are always going to be friends and family if you're looking for help. Studies have also shown that in the workplace, if you have one person that you can tell anything to, your trusted coworker, it can make an enormous difference in how you're feeling your stress at work and how you're managing it. There are ways to build a peer support team. We've done that here at the hospital. If you have an employee assistance program, take full advantage of it. They're not just about therapy. They can give assistance with finance, with legal matters. They're a tremendous resource. And you may have a human resources department that also can be very helpful. Outside of work, you may turn to spiritual leaders. Look into your local mental health resources. And if you're thinking about that, do it quickly because you'll probably be on a waiting list. Most mental health workers now have at least a 3-month waiting. Your primary care physician can be a very valuable resource for you. There are addiction recovery resources if you're dealing with those issues. I've put the National Suicide Hotline in here as well, because sometimes the stress does become too much. And final message is, don't wait. Don't think that things need to get worse before you look for help. Now's the time. So you can do this. You have everything you need. You are educated, intelligent, creative, and compassionate people. You may also be overworked and overwhelmed people, but you can still make different choices and you can make different plans. And the fact that you're here today and looking into this and paying attention might mean that you're ready to try something new. I want to thank you all. I want to thank Andrew for helping put this together and all the support that's been for putting this webinar together. Thank you for listening and be well.
Reverend Dean, your comments are excellent and very timely. Thank you so much for sharing your insight. As I was listening to you for the last hour, the number of emails and text messages I was receiving praising the timing of this, I can't even begin to tell you how much that meant to those people. So thank you very much for your time and effort and your presentation. As well, thank you, Amy Hoey, and the leadership of Lowell General Hospital for allowing us to tap into your resource in identifying the talents of Reverend Dean. So thank you very much as well, Amy. Well, that wraps up this seminar. We have another nonprofit collaborative seminar coming up in 2 days on Thursday. It is History on a Race. The time is now for An Erased LGBTQ History by Deb Fowler. That's at 9 a.m. So I hope if you haven't registered, please take a chance to register now. And we also have a Beat Business Leadership coming up on November 9th. That is the cyber protection, how to prevent, detect, and mitigate your company's exposure to cyber-enabled crime. That's with Tim Benowitz, who's a U.S. Secret Service agent in charge of the New England area for us. I hope you all can register for that. Again, it's Tuesday, November 9th at 9 a.m. The bank, Enterprise Bank, greatly appreciates you all joining us. We've been doing these for now 12 years, and we hope you find value. You'll be receiving a survey shortly, identifying what you liked about this, what could be improved about this, and also asking you for your ideas as to what, in addition to this seminar, we can do that helps your nonprofit's ability to process and move forward. If you're a customer, thank you very much. If you're not currently a customer, we welcome the opportunity to take you on as a customer, either personally or through your organization. That being said, once again, thank you, Reverend Dean, for your thoughts and insights. We hope you all have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.